Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back to Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. As we know that the Russian army is still marching forward towards Kiev from Kharkiv. They have a military convoy pushing forward into Ukraine, even as we are reporting on this, that they have targeted civilian sites, that there have been reports of things like playgrounds with remnants of explosive devices still within them, that they have targeted with missiles hospitals, and that they're just ruthlessly pushing forward. In this next segment, we're going to hear from Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, as she's talking about the sanctions that are being pushed against the Russian government and those who stand with Russia on this offensive against the Ukraine. We're also talking about the equipment and armaments that are being sent to Ukraine people so that they can defend themselves against what would seem to be a bully just trying to take their country from them. Chrystia Freeland also brings up some good points about this is an example of how democracy needs to stick together. And that if there is a bully in our world leadership, that they need to be decisively pushed back. And how to push them back with stopping bank transactions, with stopping things that will hurt their economy, and things that would take away their ability to trade with others in the world. So let's listen to what Chrystia Freeland, Harjit Sejin, and other ministers say are decisive actions to be taken against Russia at this time when they are trying to march through a completely innocent country.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everyone. Je m'appelle Catherine Lévesque. Je travaille pour le National Post et je serai votre modératrice aujourd'hui. So today we are joined by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, Minister of National Defense, Anita Anand, and the Minister of International Development, Harjit Sajjan. So they will deliver remarks and then we will take questions, starting with questions in the room and then on Zoom. The floor is yours.
Okay. Bonjour tout le monde. Ce matin, je me suis entretenu avec mes homologues de G7, les principales économies démocratiques au monde. Nous avons discuté de l'attaque barbare de la Russie contre l'Ukraine, contre la démocratie et contre l'ordre international fondé sur des règles. We were also joined by Ukraine's Minister of Finance, Serhiy Marchenko, whose country is so bravely resisting the brutality of a tyrant. Minister Marchenko joined us from a windowless room. We could see a Spartan cot behind him and a blue and yellow flag taped to the wall. He looked tired but he was determined. He thanked us for our support, assured us that Ukraine would win, and asked us to continue ratcheting up the pressure on Russia. Les ministres du G7 ont fait le point sur les sanctions coordonnées et dévastatrices que nous avons imposées à l'économie russe. Cela comprend les mesures ciblant directement la Banque centrale russe, le trésor de guerre du président Vladimir Poutine. Les sanctions que nous avons mises en place sont les plus sévères jamais imposées à une grande économie. En travaillant ensemble, en étroite collaboration avec le gouvernement du président Volodymyr Zelensky, nous irons encore plus loin dans les prochains jours. Nos nouvelles mesures vont continuer à cibler les institutions et les individus qui aident le président Poutine et qui lui permettent d'agir comme il le fait. Elles étoufferont sa capacité à financer sa guerre d'agression. And on this point, we are resolute because as the G7, Canada, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, we understand the stakes of this great conflict between democracy and dictatorship. The battleground today is Ukraine, but this is our fight too. President Putin has made a grave and historic error. This is not the behavior of a superpower. This is the last gasp of a failing kleptocracy. And President Putin has now become an international pariah. The free world is united in our conviction that his brutal assault on democracy, on the rules-based international order, and on the people of Ukraine cannot be allowed to succeed. And we are united in our support for brave Ukraine. Slava Ukraini. And now I turn over the floor to my colleague, our Minister of International Development, Minister Sajjan. Harj, please.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Today we continue to show that the world stands shoulder to shoulder with our Ukrainian friends in the face of Vladimir Putin's naked territorial aggression. There can be no doubt that Vladimir Putin's unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine will live in infamy amongst the dictators and autocrats from the 20th century. The decisions we make today and over the coming weeks and months will not only determine how we are remembered by history, but they will fundamentally shape the world for our children and our grandchildren. I had the privilege to attend President Zelensky's inauguration, and I think of the words from his speech. He said, "I really do not want my pictures in your offices, for the president is not an icon, an idol, or a portrait. Hang your kids' photos instead, and look at them each time you are making a decision." Now, in the last week, I can't stop thinking about the impact of this unjustifiable aggression that has had on his children and the children of Ukraine, whose lives have been thrown into chaos. Classrooms have been replaced by bomb shelters. Playgrounds have become battlefields. Beds have become the hard ground. It is why, as Canadians, we have and will continue to step up to show that we will stand on the right side of history. It is why today I announced at the United Nations humanitarian flash appeal and the regional refugee response plan for Ukraine that Canada will be supporting this appeal by providing $100 million Canadian for humanitarian assistance for the people of Ukraine and those who have been forced to flee to neighboring countries. This funding will support life-saving services such as shelter, water, sanitation, as well as food assistance. We will continue to be there with our Ukrainian friends and partners during this difficult time. Slava Ukraini, merci beaucoup. Thank you. Now I'll pass it over to Minister Anand.
Thank you so much, Harj. Good afternoon. Like many Canadians, I woke up this morning to more disturbing images of what is happening in Ukraine right now. In particular, the bombardment of residential areas, killing families and children in Kharkiv, and a massive column of Russian tanks approaching Kyiv. To know that civilians, children, and families' lives are being taken is even more horrific. It is important for Canadians, and indeed the world, to pay close attention to what is unfolding right now. At the same time, I want Canadians to know that we are leaving no stone unturned to help our friends in Ukraine by way of support, including military support. Il est important pour les Canadiens et le monde entier de prêter une attention particulière à ce qui se passe à ce moment. En même temps, je veux que les Canadiens sachent que nous ne négligeons rien pour aider nos amis en Ukraine par le biais d'un soutien militaire. And when I think about this support that we are providing, I think about it in three tranches. Tranche 1. In the last few weeks, we announced approximately $10 million worth of lethal and non-lethal aid, ranging from sniper rifles, carbines, pistols, body armor, and 1.5 million rounds of ammunition, all of which arrived on or before February 22nd. Tranche 2. Le 27 février, nous avons annoncé que nous allions fournir une aide non létale supplémentaire d'une valeur de 25 millions de dollars, notamment des lunettes de protection, des casques, des gilets pare-balles et des masques à gaz. Tranche 3. On February 28th, yesterday, we confirmed that we will send even more lethal aid to our friends in Ukraine in the form of 100 Carl Gustav anti-armor weapons systems, as well as related accessories and scopes, and 2,000 rounds of 84mm ammunition to go with them. Transit. On February 27th, we also approved additional airlift support in the form of CC-130s and up to 50 CAF, Canadian Armed Forces personnel, who will offer the transportation of goods and personnel in support of the Government of Canada and NATO efforts writ large in Europe. The first such flight left for Europe yesterday, and the second is leaving today. All of this to say is that we have and we will continue to support Ukraine. And to this end, today, I am confirming that in addition to the 3 tranches of bilateral support that I outlined above, the remainder of which we are working to deliver as quickly as possible, Canada will also be providing 1,600 fragmentation vests and just under 400,000 individual meal packs to our friends in Ukraine. These are items that have been requested and that we are providing. Afin de soutenir davantage l'Ukraine, je confirme aujourd'hui qu'en plus de 3 tranches de soutien bilatéral que j'ai décrites ci-dessus, dont nous nous efforçons de livrer le reste de la manière la plus rapide possible, le Canada fournira aussi 1,600 gilets pare-balles et près de 400 000 paquets de repas individuels à nos amis en Ukraine. In closing, it is absolutely shocking to see Putin use the military equipment that Russia has at its disposal to kill innocent people, and it is important to recognize that all of the countries that stand with Ukraine and that are participating in this effort, Canada included, have much to bring to the table in terms of supplies and support and fortitude. We will keep working hard for the people of Ukraine and for the sovereignty of Ukraine in coordination with our NATO allies. Slavla Ukraini, Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci au ministre. On va passer à la période des questions. Donc, on a 20 minutes. On va prendre 10 minutes dans la salle et 10 minutes sur Zoom. Je vous demande de lever votre main sur Zoom si vous avez une question. So we have 20 minutes of questions, 10 in the room, 10 on Zoom. And use the raise hand function if you would like to ask a question. Alors, on va commencer avec Boris Proulx, Le Devoir.
Madame la vice-première ministre, vous avez dit, vous promettez des sanctions supplémentaires. Votre gouvernement dit que tous les outils seront utilisés dans le futur. À combien le Canada est proche de déclarer la guerre à la Russie?
Nos leaders, les leaders du G7, les plus grandes économies démocratiques, ont discuté hier le besoin de continuer la pression sur la Russie. Et je veux souligner que ce qu'on a annoncé lundi matin, c'est une très, très grave pression. Et on a vu déjà les impacts très sévères à l'économie russe, à la rouble, et c'était nécessaire. Ce matin, avec les ministres du Finance, on a discuté les mesures que je ne vais pas annoncer ce matin, mais on a discuté plusieurs mesures que on va mettre en place pour continuer la pression contre la Russie. La Russie continue la guerre, alors la pression doit continuer. Comme ma collègue, la ministre de la Défense, a expliqué, on continue aussi de donner de l'aide militaire directement aux Ukrainiens pour les aider. Et on donne aussi de l'aide financière au gouvernement ukrainien. Je pense que le Canada et nos alliés, nous étions tous clairs que la Russie maintenant a décidé de se mettre en dehors du monde civilisé. Et pour cette raison, on a sanctionné directement le président Poutine. Pour nous, la guerre qui se déroule en Ukraine, c'est une guerre pour les principes et les valeurs démocratiques, mais c'est aussi une guerre, le résultat de laquelle aura des conséquences pratiques et importantes pour le Canada. Parce que en commençant une guerre contre l'Ukraine, un pays souverain, la Russie a violé l'ordre international fondé sur les règles qui a commencé d'exister après la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Si la Russie sera permise de réussir en faisant ça, nous aurions un monde très différent de ce que nous tous ici avons eu dans nos vies. Et ce sera un monde dangereux pour le Canada. Alors, c'est pour cette raison que cet enjeu est si important pour notre gouvernement et aussi pour toutes les démocraties du monde.
Madame Freeland, vous l'avez rencontré, le président Poutine, dans votre carrière. Est-ce que, selon vous, cet homme-là est encore rationnel?
Vous avez raison. J'ai rencontré plusieurs fois le président Poutine, mais je ne peux pas aujourd'hui répondre à votre question parce que je ne suis pas ici maintenant avec le président Poutine. Mais j'ai rencontré il y a 12 jours, pendant une réunion de G20, les leaders économiques de la Russie qui étaient là. Et j'étais très claire concernant la situation en Ukraine. J'ai adressé les leaders économiques de la Russie pendant cette réunion directement et j'ai dit que la réaction du monde démocratique sera grave et sévère en cas de guerre. Alors, on a prévenu le leadership de la Russie. Et on doit souligner qu'on va continuer avec cette pression économique.
Yasmine Mehdi avec Radio-Canada. On voit de plus en plus de Canadiens vouloir se rendre en Ukraine pour donner un coup de main humanitaire, parfois même militaire. Votre gouvernement répète que c'est un choix personnel d'aller en Ukraine ou pas. Est-ce que c'est responsable de dire ça à des Canadiens qui pourraient vouloir se rendre dans un lieu où il y a un conflit armé?
Je vais commencer, peut-être la ministre Anand voudra ajouter quelque chose. Une des valeurs très importantes du Canada, de notre pays, c'est que nous sommes un pays libre, un pays dans lequel on respecte les choix personnels que chaque personne fait. La responsabilité du gouvernement, c'est de donner de l'information qui est précise, d'être certain que les gens qui font des choix dangereux savent que ce sont des choix dangereux. Et c'est pourquoi le Premier ministre hier a expliqué que vraiment, en Ukraine, il y a une situation dangereuse. Et je peux le souligner aussi aujourd'hui. Mais en bout de ligne, je respecte énormément le droit de chaque Canadien et Canadienne de faire son choix. Anita, est-ce que tu veux ajouter quelque chose?
Je suis complètement d'accord avec ma collègue là, mais je voudrais dire que oui, ça c'est la responsabilité de notre gouvernement, de chaque gouvernement, de dire quels sont les risques, quelle est la situation là dans l'Ukraine ou des autres pays. Donc, avec cette information, on peut prendre le choix de voyager dans un autre pays. Mais bien sûr, ça c'est une situation très dangereuse et nous voulons que les citoyens ici au Canada, n'importe quoi dans le monde, peuvent vivre en sécurité. Et ça, ce n'est pas le cas maintenant en Ukraine, mais nous espérons que tout le monde qui décide de voyager là va être en sécurité aussi. Merci.
Je me permets quand même de dire que les alliés britanniques et australiens, eux, ont dit clairement à leurs ressortissants de ne pas aller en Ukraine à des fins de combat. Est-ce que vous avez un plan s'il y a des Canadiens qui se retrouvent là-bas dans des situations difficiles? Est-ce qu'on ne se met pas dans une situation où on va devoir rapatrier des gens alors que la situation sur le terrain est déjà compliquée?
Ce n'est pas la Grande-Bretagne ou l'Australie qui fait la politique ou les décisions pour le Canada. On était très clair avant la guerre que la situation en Ukraine est vraiment très, très dangereuse. Et on a prévenu tous les citoyens canadiens que c'est une situation dangereuse et qu'après le début de guerre, ce ne sera pas possible pour le gouvernement de protéger les gens qui sont dans l'Ukraine, qui inclut les membres de ma famille, par exemple. C'est la réalité, c'est une réalité très, très grave, mais on était clair et on continue d'être clair.
Hi, Ms. Freeland. Oh, good. Hi, Ms. Freeland. Mackenzie Gray with CTV. I'd say there's no one in your government who knows Russian oligarchs as well as you do, and your government has sanctioned a number of them, but there's one key person you haven't sanctioned, which is Roman Abramovich. He's at the top of Alexei Navalny's list of oligarchs to be sanctioned. He's one of the most prominent oligarchs in the world, and he has substantial holdings in Canada. So why hasn't your government sanctioned him?
We are looking carefully at the holdings of all Russian oligarchs and Russian companies inside Canada. We're reviewing them, and everything is on the table.
Yesterday, a Pentagon spokesperson said a no-fly zone over Ukraine is not something the U.S. is interested in. Today, Boris Johnson echoed that. Is it the position of the Canadian government that we are not interested in enforcing a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Our position there is aligned with that of our allies, and I don't know if our Minister of Defense would like to comment further.
Sure, just picking up on where Chrystia left off. NATO is a defensive alliance, and putting in place a no-fly zone would be a severe escalation on the part of NATO, and it is not on the table at the current time. We will continue to support Ukraine and NATO in many other ways, including in terms of the 3 tranches of aid I outlined in my remarks. And we've been doing that. We will continue to do that. And we will also continue to support NATO's defensive and deterrent posture, especially by increasing our support on NATO's eastern flank. Thank you.
Mr. Freeland, Ryan Tumblety, National Post. You've brought in economic sanctions that were far in excess of what people thought was possible even 10 days ago. Military support is coming from all of our allies. Are you worried at all that you're running out of levers to pull here that are reasonable and that the Russian government does not appear to be slowing down?
No. And I can elaborate a little bit. We had a very good, very substantive conversation with the G7 finance ministers this morning. The Ukrainian finance minister shared with us some very creative and thoughtful ideas that he has. And after he left us, we talked about additional steps we can take. The reality is that Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine has changed the world. The fact that Vladimir Putin has taken this profoundly damaging step has put him beyond the pale. And the world's democracies understand the significance of what he has done. And we really understand that failure is not an option. And so I think everyone here has seen, everyone in Canada has seen, everyone in the world has seen that once the extent of Vladimir Putin's actions became clear, we needed to turn to truly unconventional measures, to take steps that have never been taken before. You asked, Ryan, if I am worried that we will run out of things to do. And let me point out 2 additional elements that are in play here that I think are really important and are on the side of the good. The first one is the people of Ukraine. I think the world and I think the Kremlin has been astonished at the strength and the effectiveness of the opposition. And Ukraine has been effective on every front. It has been effective on the cyber front. It has been effective on the communications front. It has been much more effective militarily than anyone predicted before this war started. And I think people have been astonished, although perhaps not Ukrainians themselves, at the extent to which there has been a true mobilization, really, of every single Ukrainian. So that's a really, really important factor. And the second thing that's important here is Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia is an economy and a society which is deeply integrated into the West and deeply integrated into the global economy. And what we are seeing here from Vladimir Putin is an attempt to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to behave like a communist dictator, but he and his entourage had thought they could do that and continue to enjoy all of the fruits of global capitalism. And what the world decided really, really clearly last week, and then particularly this weekend, is you don't get to do that. If you make war on the rules-based international order, we're going to cut you out of the global economy. I don't think that that is the deal that Putin's entourage signed up for, and I don't think that's the deal that the Russian people signed up for. So I do think our measures are important. They come second to the heroism of the Ukrainian people, but I am proud that Canada is one of the countries that is providing this important support.
You talked a little bit about Vladimir Putin being isolated, having a small entourage. Are you worried that he is not seeing a bigger picture here and that there may be a need for, is there a need, I guess, for leadership change in Russia?
I don't think I actually said he was isolated, but I talked about the people around him. It is impossible for me to judge what Vladimir Putin is thinking. That's up to him to explain.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're going to have to go on Zoom. On va commencer avec Raymond Filion de TVA.
Merci. Bonjour, Mme Freeland. Vous parlez des sanctions les plus sévères, mais quand on regarde aujourd'hui ce qui se passe sur le terrain, la Russie intensifie ses attaques. Qu'est-ce qui vous reste comme leviers additionnels contre M. Poutine, concrètement?
Raymond, avec beaucoup de respect pour vous, je ne peux pas annoncer les mesures additionnelles aujourd'hui. On est en train de les discuter, de travailler avec nos partenaires et nos alliés. Nous avons proposé beaucoup de choses et nos alliés ont proposé beaucoup de choses. Nous trouvons que la chose la plus efficace, c'est de travailler ensemble, d'annoncer des mesures ensemble. Et on va continuer de faire ça. Mais je veux vous assurer, je veux assurer tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes, et je veux assurer la Russie qu'on prépare des mesures additionnelles et on va les annoncer dans les journées suivantes.
Peut-être.
Il y a bien des gens qui s'inquiètent.
Vraiment, Anita veut ajouter quelque chose.
Et je pourrais ajouter quelque chose d'autre aussi. C'est important de se souvenir que nous avons déjà donné l'aide létale et non létale et toutes les options sont sur la table maintenant et nous continuons de penser qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire pour aider le peuple de l'Ukraine. Merci.
Êtes-vous surprise que M. Poutine intensifie les attaques?
Je pense que c'est toujours une erreur d'essayer de prévenir ce que une contrepartie va faire. On doit être prête à toutes les possibilités et on doit réagir à ce qui on voit sur le terrain et on doit avoir une étroite collaboration, une étroite coordination et c'est ce qu'on a avec nos alliés du G7, du tout le monde démocratique et aussi, et c'est important de souligner, avec l'Ukraine. Les Ukrainiens ont démontré qu'ils comprennent et ils maîtrisent la situation très très bien et ils eux-mêmes ont des idées très intéressantes, très très créatives et on les écoute et on travaille avec eux pour les suivantes mesures qu'on va prendre.
Merci. On a le temps pour une dernière question. Alex Ballingle, Toronto Star.
Hey, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Awesome. Just following up on Mac's question about Abramovich and the oligarchs that Canada has not sanctioned. I'm just hoping for some clarity on you're promising additional measures. Have we basically gone as far as sort of international consensus is allowing us to go, or why haven't we gone further in terms of more individuals in the Putin circle being sanctioned?
I don't think it's really fair to my colleagues around the world to talk about the conversations we have behind closed doors. I suspect that might make them less enthusiastic about collaborating with Canada and listening to Canada's great new ideas. I think it's, maybe I'll leave it there, and I will just underscore. We are very aware of the Russian interests in Canada. These, of course, are much less significant than Russian interests in most of our partner countries, but we're looking at those closely. And, as I've said, we will have additional economic measures that will be taken in the days to come.
Just as a follow-up to that, there's an example of this company that's been in the news a little bit talking about these sanctions. Evraz, the steel manufacturer's got operations in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and it's been a major provider. I think the majority of the pipeline steel for the Trans Mountain expansion has actually come from this provider, this company. Abramovich, for example, is a majority or a major stakeholder. Two other named oligarchs are on the board of management. Are we worried in sanctioning, or are we trying to not sanction companies that if we sanction them, there would be economic pain in Canada? How are we approaching that in terms of companies that have a significant economic presence in Canada that may be tied to oligarchs in Putin's circles?
So when it comes to sanctions, let me just underscore that we know that we are the most effective when we act together. And I think that one of the reasons that the sanctions have been much tougher than Russia expected and have had a much tougher impact than anyone expected before this war began is that we've managed to have unprecedented unity among the democracies. If you take, for example, the sanctions on the reserves of the Central Bank of Russia, it really required strong collective action for that to work and have an impact. So I want to emphasize the practical value of acting together with our allies. When it comes to Evraz, let me say a couple of things. The steel that was provided by Evraz for the TMX pipeline was fully delivered by the second quarter of 2021, when sanctions were not in place and the war had not yet begun. I have said, and I really want to emphasize, everything is on the table, and we are looking carefully at the holdings of oligarchs in Canada. Something I learned during our trade wars with the United States, and it feels almost quaint to recall a time when that was our concern. But something that I learned, something that Canada learned, is tariffs and retaliation and sanctions are the most effective when you can devise policies that have the maximum impact on the counterparty whose attention you are seeking to get and do the minimal damage to yourself. And certainly the Western world has thought about that in putting together the sanctions package against Russia. But I think we all also really have understood that at the end of the day, if we are truly determined to stand with Ukraine, if the stakes in this fight are as high as I believe them to be, we have to be honest with ourselves. I have to be honest with Canadians that there could be some collateral damage in Canada. And that's something that the G7 finance ministers discussed very early this morning. We spoke candidly with one another, and we said, in order to be really effective, in order to really have an impact, we are going to have to be prepared for there to be some adverse consequences for our own economies. Of course, that is much, much, much more true for our European partners than it is for us, but it's the reality. And I think that that's something, Canadians are smart. I think Canadians understand that. I really do believe that Canadians understand the stakes of this fight. And I believe that Canadians understand that we need to be prepared to do things that are hard, to do things that are costly, to avoid something which would be much more damaging to Canada, which is a successful occupation by Vladimir Putin of Ukraine, with all of the consequences that would have.
Okay.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.